The command deck of the Jathic warship Eternal Dominion hummed with the confidence of 1,000 victories. Commander Vexrel stood before the holographic display, his 4 eyes gleaming with anticipation as he observed the small human vessel drifting in the debris field. "Another scout ship," he clicked to his subordinates. "The humans send children to war." What Vexrel didn't know was that Earth had learned something the Galactic Council never understood. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the one that follows orders, it's the one that rewrites them. Lisa pressed her forehead against the cold metal of the escape pod, her breath forming small clouds of condensation. Her hands were still trembling, not from fear, but from the effort of keeping them still. The pills helped. The ones they gave her before deployment. The ones that turned the screaming in her head into a whisper. "You good?" Alex asked from across the cramped space, his voice flat, emotionless. His eyes were fixed on the pod's ceiling, but Lisa knew he wasn't seeing it. He was seeing whatever he always saw when things got quiet. "Define good," Lisa replied, her lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. They'd been drifting for 47 hours since the Prometheus took a plasma torpedo to the reactor. 47 hours in a tin can with recycled air, and 2 people who, under normal circumstances, would never have been allowed within 100 meters of military service. But these weren't normal circumstances. The pod shuddered as a tractor beam locked onto it. Lisa felt her heart rate spike, not with panic but with something else, something hungry. "They're reeling us in," Alex said, finally looking at her. His pupils were dilated, black pools that reflected nothing. "You remember the briefing." Lisa laughed, a sharp sound like breaking glass. "Get captured, cause chaos, make them regret it." "Specifically," Alex continued, pulling out a small injector from his boot, "we're supposed to demonstrate why Earth doesn't send soldiers anymore." The injector contained a cocktail of neurostimulants, adrenal enhancers, and compounds that Earth's military psychiatrists had deemed ethically problematic for conventional warfare. When Lisa had asked what they were, the technician had simply said, "They make you more of what you already are." For people like Lisa and Alex, that was a terrifying prospect for everyone except them. The Jathic boarding party that cracked open the escape pod expected to find terrified survivors. What they found instead was Lisa sitting cross-legged on the floor, humming an old Earth song, while Alex stood perfectly still, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. "Humans," one of the soldiers chittered in standard galactic, "you are prisoners of the Jathic Empire. Surrender and you will be processed according to the warfare conventions." Lisa stopped humming. She looked up at the 8-foot-tall insectoid warrior with its segmented armor and plasma rifle, and she smiled, really smiled. "Did you just say processed?" she asked. "I love that word, it's so clinical, so final." The soldier's mandibles clicked in confusion. Before it could respond, Alex moved. Human beings, the Galactic Council had noted in their xenobiology reports, were classified as persistence predators, evolved to chase prey to exhaustion, to track, to never stop. But what they hadn't understood was what happened when you took humans who already couldn't stop, who already saw the world through a fractured lens, and gave them permission to be exactly what they were. Alex crossed the 3 meters to the nearest soldier in 0.8 seconds. His hands, just bare hands, found the weak points in the Jathic's armor with the precision of someone who'd spent years studying anatomy not to heal, but to destroy. The soldier's chittering turned to a shriek as Alex demonstrated the surprising fragility of exoskeletal biology when subjected to informed violence. Lisa stood slowly, stretching like a cat. The other soldiers raised their weapons but hesitated. In their culture, combat had rules, protocols. What they were witnessing didn't fit any tactical database. "Here's the thing about Earth," Lisa said conversationally, walking toward them as plasma bolts scorched the air around her, some missing, some hitting, the pain just more data, more fuel. We didn't send our best and brightest. We didn't send our heroes. She reached the second soldier. Her knife, a simple carbon steel blade she'd smuggled in a body cavity because she always had a knife, slid between armor plates with surgical precision. We sent the ones who scared us, the ones we locked away, the ones we medicated, institutionalized, studied. Her voice was almost dreamy now, the stimulants flooding her system, turning thought into action without the hesitation of conscience. And you know what we told them? The third soldier tried to retreat. Alex was already there, appearing from its blind spot like a nightmare-given form. We told them they could be monsters, Lisa continued, officially with benefits. Commander Vexrel watched the security feeds with growing horror. The two humans moved through his ship like a plague, and the worst part was the randomness of it. They didn't follow tactical patterns. They split up, regrouped, disappeared into maintenance shafts, emerged in crew quarters. They didn't just kill, they performed. Lisa left messages scrawled in lubricant on bulkheads. Philosophical questions, poetry, jokes. Alex arranged corpses in geometric patterns that analysis suggested might be some form of human art. Send security teams to. Vexrel began, but his tactical officer interrupted. Commander, they've breached Deck 7. That's the civilian quarters. Vexrel felt something he hadn't experienced in his 40 years of service, genuine fear, not for himself, but for the fundamental assumptions that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. There were rules, conventions, honor. These humans didn't seem to know about any of that, or worse, they knew and simply didn't care. Lisa and Alex met at the ship's main reactor, as planned. They were both covered in various fluids, some their own, most not. Lisa was laughing, that high, brittle sound that had gotten her kicked out of 3 universities and 2 military academies before someone in intelligence realized what she could be used for. You look terrible, Alex said, his voice still flat, but there was something in his eyes now. Satisfaction, maybe, or just the absence of the usual emptiness. You look worse, Lisa replied. She pulled out the detonator they'd been given. Standard plasma charges enough to turn the reactor into a small sun. They're evacuating. Good, Alex said. We're not monsters. Lisa raised an eyebrow. We're absolutely monsters. We're just their monsters. It was an important distinction. Earth hadn't sent psychopaths to slaughter innocents. They'd sent weapons with just enough conscience to be pointed, but not enough to be stopped by the weight of what they'd done. The evacuations completed. The ship's population transferred to nearby vessels, spreading stories that would ripple through the Jathic Empire. Stories of humans who fought like demons, who smiled while dying, who turned warfare from a profession into an expression of barely controlled madness. Lisa pressed the detonator. The rescue beacon activated automatically as they drifted in the new escape pod, watching the eternal Dominion bloom into radioactive fire. Mission successful, Lisa said to the recorder. 1 enemy capital ship destroyed. Estimated enemy casualties, minimal due to evacuation. Psychological impact, significant. She clicked it off and looked at Alex, who was already staring at nothing again, the combat high-fatting, the emptiness returning. 3 more months, she said quietly. Then we go back in the box. That was the deal. Serve your time, earn your freedom, or at least a comfortable cell with books and privacy. Better than the alternatives they'd faced before Earth realized that the same neural patterns that made someone unsuitable for society made them terrifyingly effective in specific circumstances. The Galactic Council would eventually establish first contact with Earth proper. They would demand explanations for deploying combatants who violated every convention of warfare. Earth's representatives would explain, calmly and with appropriate documentation, that Lisa and Alex weren't soldiers. They were something else entirely. The Council would add new articles to the warfare conventions, prohibitions on deploying combatants with specific psychological profiles, mandatory mental health screenings, treaties about what constituted acceptable human intervention. But late at night, in military academies across a dozen species, instructors would tell stories about the humans who didn't fight for honor or territory or ideology. The ones who fought because something in their wiring made violence not a last resort, but a native language. And somewhere, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Lisa would be writing poetry about the color of alien blood in zero gravity, while Alex stared at walls and waited for the next time Earth needed monsters in army suits. Because HFY, humanity fuck yeah, wasn't about being the good guys. Sometimes it was just about being the ones who scared the bad guys more. And